Hi everyone, I'm Stokely. I played my first round of Frisbee golf on the world's first permanent Frisbee golf course, Oak Grove Park, when it was the only Frisbee golf course in the entire world. And tonight, I am not going to tell my story. Because there's a whole bunch of Oak Grove Gophers, the movers and shakers, the promoters, the innovators of this sport, that have brought the sport and to the levels that we never could have dreamed of back in those days. And I'm not going to tell their story either. Their story is being told tonight, just not by me. Because there's another group of Oak Grove Gophers whose story is rarely told, but should be, because their story is as important to the history, not just of Oak Grove, but of disc golf, as all the speakers and all the promoters here tonight. That's the story I'm going to try to give a voice to tonight. By the way, I cry a lot when I talk publicly, so forgive me. Thank you. Okay, is that better? I'm not starting over. So this actual story begins with a geography lesson, because Oak Grove Park sits across the street from Locking Out Flintridge. And because of that, the police of Locking Out Flintridge did not come to Oak Grove Park. Woo! This is relevant to the story, because Oak Grove Park was in Pasadena, but the entrance to Oak Grove Park was on the opposite side of the Arroyo Seco from the rest of Pasadena, which meant the Pasadena police rarely came to Oak Grove Park. Relevant to the story. I think in the 1970s and the 1980s, Oak Grove Park was probably the least patrolled park in all of Los Angeles. Now, I mentioned all the, I'm going to call them the white-collar community of promoters and innovators in the Oak Grove Gophers. They worked at Oak Grove every day because they were building careers, raising families, taking care of responsibilities. But in northern Los Angeles, there was a large group of men, which I'm going to call the blue-collar community. They were the construction workers, trade workers, day laborers, bunch of hippies back then. But these were men who worked hard all day, and at the end of the day needed a place to get away from it all, unsupervised, and take the edge off. And because of Oak Grove Park's geography, this became a place where these men could come together and do that. Now, as is the case in most blue-collar worlds, these men were often, let's say, between jobs for extended periods of time. And Oak Grove Park is the place where they came to take a break from just how difficult life was and forget about their problems. Now, in 1975-76, the first Frisbee golf course was put into the ground, and these men had the same experience that everyone in this room had, which is, we tried Frisbee golf and went, oh my God, this is kind of like the funnest thing we've ever done. And because of the love of Frisbee, these men created a community around this game that we all love. Now, this is where my story intersects briefly. I was the latchkey kid in Locking Out Flintridge who had come to Oak Grove to play Frisbee every single day. And the Oak Grove Gophers brought me in, adopted me. They made me part of their tribe. Now, as men have always done throughout history, the men looked out for the weakest of their tribe, and I was the weakest of their tribe. Quick story. I played Frisbee golf until dark every single day, and every single day, without exception, the men of Oak Grove, at least one of the Oak Grove Gophers, would drive me home to my house in Locking Out to make sure I made it home safely. Now, that might seem like that's not a big deal, except these men were driving broken down, worn out vehicles in Locking Out Flintridge, begging to be pulled over often with suspended licenses or traffic warrants. Getting me home safely was more important to them. They looked after the weakest of their tribe. But they didn't just look after me, they looked after each other as well. Here's one story. Anyone in the old days will be familiar with this. The police rarely came to Oak Grove Park. But if they did come, the first Oak Grove Gopher to spot a police officer would shout, "Guard!" And throughout the park, you all remember this, throughout the park you would hear an echoing of cops, 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 cops. And then the Gophers would set down their blue ribbon. There was no microbrews back then, not no program. They would set down their PBR, they would walk 6 feet away, and they would putt until they were free to enjoy their slightly warmer beer. This community formed around Frisbee golf. But it was more than just that. They formed a family because they didn't just look out so they could drink beer in the park. They also loaned each other money, they bought each other meals, gave each other couches to sleep on, found jobs for each other. They provided the emotional support that blue-collar men provide in our own unique ways for each other. They formed a family. Now, why is this important to the history of disc golf? Well, the reason it's important is not long after a course popped up in La Mirada, and the exact same thing happened there. Then it happened again in Sylmar, in Huntington Beach, Morley Field. It happened to Northeast Lions in Tulsa. It happened at Brom Springs in Huntsville. Honey Bear in Peru, Indiana. This crazy experiment where a bunch of blue-collar, mostly hippies back then, came together and found this love of throwing plastic things into metal things and then forming a bond and a family out of it. This experiment got replicated not just at these courses, but then in cities, and then eventually Canada, Sweden, Japan, all over the world. With all due respect to the PDJ, with all due respect to the Disc Golf Pro Tour, that is not what I believe in my heart is the greatest thing about our sport. The best thing about our sport is the family that is formed around it. So the Oak Grove Gophers weren't the only family. They weren't the only Frisbee family out there. They were the first. They were the origin of the disc golf Frisbee family. And as communities have sprung up, we're more than 10 million members of our tribe globally. Every one of those new communities has a piece of the Oak Grove Gophers in it, because it all began here. And tonight, the Oak Grove Gophers, the forgotten Oak Grove Gophers, is who I want to remember.